Hi everyone, this is our channel, Around My Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
Before this summer, I had zero experience with dating apps. Tinder wasn't even released until 2 years after my long term relationship ended. During 7 years of my relationship, I had played around on my friends' apps, but never swiped left or right. Finding myself suddenly single at the beginning of the summer and in desperate need of distraction, I dove headfirst into the pool of online dating. I started with Tinder because my town is too small for anything else, and my cold dead heart wanted casual dates and nothing serious. And that's the whole purpose of Tinder. Tinder met most of my expectations. I went on a handful of dates, met some cool guys, and some not so cool guys. I even hung out with a few truly interesting people, like a radio DJ who runs a wedding business on the side. What I did not expect from Tinder, however, was how most of these interactions started to make me feel good about myself. I mean, really good about myself. Like every woman in the world, I've never been happy with my body. At a size 10, I'm labeled plus size, and I've worn glasses on and off throughout my whole life. When I'm out with my girlfriends, I'm never the girl who's hit on, flirted with, or even picked up. Ever since I hit puberty and became aware of attractive versus unattractive, I've thought of myself as filling the role of the fat friend who just sits back and smiles. Obviously, I've had boyfriends, but they've always been my friends first. So when they said you're gorgeous, what I heard was, I found you gorgeous only after getting to know you. I didn't immediately think you were pretty. I know that having someone attracted to your personality is way more important than thinking you're cute. But I wouldn't hate having just one guy who doesn't know me at all tell me that I'm attractive. Friends, family, and boyfriends, I don't believe. But a total stranger, that person I might actually listen to. This brings us back to Tinder. One of my first nights using the app, a friend and I sat on my back deck and decided who to swipe left and right on. With each it's a match, we laughed and looked into the guy's profile a bit more. After the third match, I said, these guys are just judging me on my appearance, right? And my friend nodded. So they're only swiping because they think I'm cute? Or are they just swiping on every girl? We concluded that obviously some of the guys were swiping right on every girl, but the chances of every single guy doing that were slim. We swiped some more. When I started matching with guys who were classically good looking, well, I won't lie, that felt really good. A hot guy actually thinks that I'm attractive? What? No. How could that be? Then the messages started. Some guys went right in with, you're really pretty. Others went in for a conversation first before giving out compliments here and there. I know that this is how people operate on Tinder, but keep in mind that I'm not used to anything. It wasn't until I started meeting with these guys that I wondered, can Tinder actually boost my self esteem? Two guys asked how someone as pretty as me was still single. I went on a date with one guy who told me in Spanish that I was beautiful. Another guy who I'd met up with a few times asked me, are you looking for something serious? I laughed like a loon in response. It wasn't the question that surprised me. It was the fact that I was coming from an incredibly attractive, incredibly fit guy. Because, yes, I'm being shallow and only swiping right on guys who I find physically attractive. When I was done laughing, I said something awkward like, oh, maybe? I mean, I'm not against it. My mind, however, was saying, are you serious? Have you seen yourself? Have you seen me? I was, in fact, not attractive, but I simply knew how to dress well. I retreated into my unhealthy shell. Soon after that guy, I hung out with a sweet, nerdy medical student who was in town on a vacation. We got along well. The next day, as we met up again, he seemed shocked that I was on a second date. He kept repeating, you're just so beautiful. I never get to do things like this. I don't know how to respond to compliments. And the medical boy shook his head. He said, "Don't do that. Don't body shame yourself. You're so attractive. Have you seen yourself? You're gorgeous." Something about that guy made my typical self hate thoughts start to lose hold. Again, I know that this is the type of stuff people say on Tinder, but let's be honest, why put in the extra effort? Unless it's true. Somewhere between the casual Tinder chats, the handful of dates, my mind circled a new thought. Am I attractive? I stared at myself in my full length mirror. I tried to see what these guys saw. Guys who did not know me at all. Guys who are not being swayed by my personality. And guys who have no reason to compliment me because I'm not looking for another relationship anytime soon. Suddenly I started to see it. Where I used to see unsightly lumps and a stomach I sucked in before turning off the lights, now I see a healthy, curvy, and dare I say it, slender body. Friends, family, and boyfriends have always told me that I'm attractive, but it wasn't until these strangers started repeating it over and over that I actually started to hear it. So, which is boosting my self esteem? Tinder or just plain dating? Or are they working in with one another because without Tinder, I probably wouldn't be dating at all? Romantically, I tend not to put myself out there. I typically wouldn't approach a guy and try flirting with him, for fear of rejection, of course. With Tinder, however, just matching with someone seems to lessen the fear of rejection. Whether you matched with them because they're genuinely interested, or you matched because they're saying yes to everyone, seeing that it's a match message eases a tiny bit of the tension that goes into dating. Whether it's thanks to Tinder or not, in the past few months I've discovered newfound confidence. When someone compliments me, I say thank you instead of responding with a self hatred joke. When I meet a date for the first time, I work at being my usual chatty, sarcastic self rather than being shy and quiet. I have flirted with guys and even gave a random musician my number. For once in my life, I feel like I'm someone worth dating, rather than fearing my significant other might be too good for me. Did Tinder give me this confidence boost? Or am I just getting older and wiser? I don't know for sure. But what I do know is that I'm not going to stop online dating anytime soon.
Most people I saw hated and cursed at me, and some treated me more kindly and gently than usual. It was very confusing, to be honest. I didn't know the reason for people's animosity towards me, but I thought perhaps it had something to do with my mother. Before telling my story, let me introduce myself. My name is Maria. I lived in a poor neighborhood fraught with drugs and death. People who lived there were mostly losers. Growing up, people have always looked at me with disdain, for no good reason. People ostracized me. I had no friends, no one to speak to. When I would return home, I'd ask my mother why people didn't like me. She wouldn't answer. She'd just cry and smile sadly. She would often tell me to ignore people's looks. But how can I ignore the looks of everyone around me? It was the biggest mystery in my life. I didn't know if my father was alive or not. The only thing I knew about my father was how he looked, from a picture on our wall. And if I asked about him, my mother would only tell me that he traveled and he never came back, that she didn't know anything about him, almost as if he were dead. But I suspected that she wasn't telling me the whole truth, and I thought people in our neighborhood knew something I didn't. Perhaps that was the reason they hated me so much. Aside from this problem, I was a clever girl at school. I dreamed of having a good position in life to make my mother proud of me. One day, as I was returning home from school, I felt that someone was following me. I turned around once, but saw no one. The second time I turned around, I saw a man. He was wearing a mask. I was afraid, and I ran home to my mother. She was worried, and she just hugged me. It happened a lot after that. It seemed like everywhere I went, that man just happened to be there. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, who that man could be. Eventually, I graduated and got a job with a well-known company. We left our poor neighborhood and rented a flat in a good area. I had almost forgotten about the mystery man who used to follow me often. Then, one day, a poor man came into my office. He handed me an envelope. Smiling, He told me to say hello to Isabella, then disappeared, leaving me with even more questions. Who was he? And how did he know my mother? I returned home, told her about this man, and showed her the envelope. She looked worried and asked me to quickly open it for her. When I did, I found something unexpected. One old photo of him, and a recent one. I didn't know it then, but that man was my father, and all I did was walk away. I curiously began reading the letter. It said, "Dear Maria, I am sorry for everything. Sorry for the suffering I caused you and your mother. Sorry for not being there with you as you grew up. I hope that you can both forgive me. Please tell Isabella that I never forgot about her, or you. I love you two so much." I looked at my mother. She was holding the photographs and crying quietly. So the mystery man who had often followed me home had actually been my father, watching me from afar. I asked my mother, "Why did you hide the truth from me? Why didn't you tell me where my father was all these years?" She replied, "I was afraid to shock you with the news that your father was in prison for killing someone." And I gasped, "Killing someone?" I don't really like Indian movies because the actors are always overreacting, and the movies are not logical at all. But this is just my personal opinion. However, I've discovered that there are stories stranger than Indian movies. Let me give you a real life example. I'll tell you a story about a young woman named Samantha. Samantha was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and green eyes. She lived with her grandmother after her parents died in a horrible car accident. The whole country read about it. She had many friends, and all the neighbors liked her. They considered her the most beautiful girl in town. Many had proposed to her, but she didn't care much for them. One day, Samantha was walking alone down the street after visiting one of her friends. Suddenly, she had an eerie feeling that someone was following her. She began running and crying for help. Her follower began running and stopped her. He was an ugly man, pointing a knife in her direction. He asked her to hand over her purse. She threw it at him and made a run for it. The man said wait and made to stop her, but another man appeared out of nowhere and punched the thief, who fell unconscious. The brave and good Samaritan picked up Samantha's purse and handed it to her. He was very handsome, with green eyes, soft hair, and an amazing smile. He escorted her back home, and she felt that he was her knight in shining armor. She went inside and hugged her grandmother tight, who was a little surprised but smiled. Samantha was so happy that she gently pulled her grandmother to her feet, and they whirled around and danced playfully. The very next day, she was surprised when she answered the doorbell. Steve, the tall, handsome man, was standing there, holding flowers. He proposed to her, and she said yes. Thus began their love story. Then one day, Samantha was standing in the kitchen preparing dinner. Steve and her grandmother were out, but they were supposed to be back soon. Samantha had everything ready, and she set the table. The house door opened, and Steve walked in. Samantha went to greet him, but she felt dizzy and fainted. Steve quickly took her to the hospital. The doctor congratulated Steve, saying that he was going to be a father. Steve was ecstatic, but Samantha was not. Instead, she was shocked and nervous. She said that she was too young to have kids, that she wasn't ready to be a mother. Steve was taken aback and said, "But why? Don't you want him?" Things were different from that point on. Samantha tried to get an abortion several times, but Steve was always stopping her. She couldn't accept it. She blamed Steve, but Steve couldn't understand her. In her 7th month of pregnancy, Samantha was with her grandmother at the supermarket when she saw a small boy run onto the road. Fearing he might get run over by a car, Samantha quickly pulled the boy off the road to safety. The boy's mother saw what happened and thanked Samantha, feeling so grateful and relieved. Samantha was crying at the moment and replied, "No need to thank me. I'm going to be a mother like you soon." For the first time, she was beginning to feel real affection for the baby. "Forgive me," she silently thought to herself. She tried to contact Steve many times to tell him that she had finally accepted. She was ready to become a mother, but he never responded. Finally, the day had come. Samantha went to the hospital to give birth. After the surgery, she was very tired. Nevertheless, when she woke up, she immediately asked for the baby. Her grandmother handed her the child. It was a daughter, and she was so beautiful. The nurse tried to take the baby out of her arms, but Samantha refused. wanting to hold her for as long as she could. The next day, Samantha heard a big commotion, and she had a feeling of dread that something bad had just happened. It was confirmed when she saw her grandmother's face. She asked what had happened, and her grandmother told her that a child was missing and had apparently been kidnapped. Samantha's pale face slowly pleaded, "Please don't tell me that it was my daughter." When her grandmother nodded, Samantha broke down and began crying and wailing in pain. The nurses tried to calm her down, and when she did, her grandmother came over to her and handed her a note. It had been found in her missing daughter's hospital crib. It was in Steve's handwriting. It simply said, "If you don't want her, I do." Then Samantha fainted. For many years, she tried finding her baby, but couldn't. Steve and her daughter had vanished into thin air. She felt as if time had stopped for her, but Steve didn't feel that way. He raised their daughter into a beautiful young woman. He named her Margot. Whenever Margot asked about her mother, Steve would always tell her that her mother was dead, but he often told her stories about her mother and how much he had loved her. Margot's intuition, however, told her that her father wasn't being completely honest with her and that he was hiding some big dark secret. One day, Steve fell ill unexpectedly. He called Margot to him and told her that he was very sick and felt that he was going to die soon. He said that he wanted to reveal a secret that he had long kept from her, that her mother was actually alive, and that her name was Samantha. He told her that he had kidnapped her from the hospital at birth because her mother did not want a child. He regretted it and asked Margot to forgive him. He gave her Samantha's address, and soon after, he died. After his death, Margot decided to go looking for her mother. I am Margot, and I am now standing at my mother's address. At her front door, I cannot predict my mother's reaction when she answers the door and I introduce myself as her daughter, but I'm going to hug her and tell her that I've missed her for so long. I am addicted to food. I suffer a lot. I need help. I've tried to give up, but I fail every time. Hamburgers. Who can give up eating hamburgers, especially with barbecue sauce? I didn't mind this kind of addiction, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me begin by introducing myself. I am Patricia, 15 years old, living with my parents and my brother. I lead a quiet life. No interests, no hobbies, except for eating, that is. Food is my faithful friend. It never leaves me. It is my partner, my soulmate. But having food as your soulmate has insidious side effects. A dark side, if you will. It denies me a healthy life, robs me of the energy to play, and causes me to sleep excessively. I would much rather stay at home with a bag of potato chips than go out and exercise. My soulmate ultimately betrayed me, though, last Thanksgiving at my granny's home. She lives in a state nearby. Granny was a clever doctor and an excellent cook at that. She could conjure up something really delicious. On that day, she had prepared barbecue turkey with nuts and other secret recipe ingredients. The taste was so great, as if it had descended from heaven itself. I felt like I was fighting a food war, and I had to win at all costs. I ate and ate and ate. I don't know why, but I just couldn't control myself. I attacked that turkey like it was the last on the planet. But every culinary war with a worthy adversary, such as the barbecued turkey, has its own unique type of casualties. Suddenly, I found myself unable to breathe. I fell to my knees and passed out. The turkey had won. I woke up later in the hospital, though, still clinging to an unfinished turkey leg. The doctor told me that I was gaining way too much weight. He said that I should be put on a diet. Diet? Man, how I hated that word. It hung over my head like the sword of Damocles. It meant depriving me of my passion, my reason for living. I considered eating vegetables in small amounts to be the worst form of cruel and unusual punishment, the worst form of torture imaginable. Imagine thinking of a wonderful, greasy, cheese-laden pizza with all the toppings and then suddenly opening your eyes to find a healthy green salad bowl. But I had reached a turning point in life. One day, my brother was playing on the street, while I was sitting at home gazing longingly at a tempting piece of cheesecake, just sitting there, taunting, daring me to eat it. I struggled mightily to resist the urge, but in the end I succumbed and wolfed it down like a starving animal. Shortly afterwards, I began feeling dizzy, but I was unable to call for help this time, and then I passed out again. I was taken to the hospital. While lying in the hospital bed, half conscious, I overheard the doctor say to someone, "She needs to stop eating or it will be the death of her." I thought to myself, "Whoa, death?" So I made up my mind right then, right there. I resolved to fight a war against my appetite. On our way back home, I told my father that I wanted to see a nutritionist. He was delighted to hear that. Later, at the clinic, the doctor welcomed us in. She told me how to overcome my eating fetish. She gave me a strict diet regimen with a schedule full of healthy meals. I kept telling myself that winning this war was possible. I simply had to be patient and persevere. I stuck to the strict diet and did some physical workouts. My parents supported me wholeheartedly. I was enthusiastic. I can totally do this. A week passed quickly, and I eagerly visited the doctor to receive some good news. When the doctor weighed me and told me that my weight hadn't changed at all, I was crestfallen. She looked at me and asked me, how was this possible? I told her I didn't know, because I was following her diet thoroughly, though it did require a tremendous effort on my part. Another week passed, and again I went to the doctor. The results were the same. She said to me, "Patricia, are you sure you're following the diet I prescribed for you?" I said yes. She sat there wondering. Then she told me with a puzzled look on her face, "It's odd, but your weight is increasing, not decreasing." This unexpected piece of news mystified me. Another week passed. No change. The doctor was nonplussed. I returned home with a dejected look on my face. My father asked me what was wrong. And when I told him, he laughed. Do you believe that? My father actually laughed at my predicament. I was furious. He gestured an apology with his hand and then told me that it was my own fault. I was puzzled. What are you talking about? He told me that I had been sleepwalking to the refrigerator every night and eating everything in sight. I was taken aback. I couldn't believe it. "Stop acting like you didn't know it," he said. "You must have been awake." I replied, "No, father, I'm not acting. I was truly unaware that I've been sleepwalking and eating in my sleep." But now that we've finally solved the mystery of the increasing weight, we returned to the doctor with this new information and told her the situation. She laughed and told me that my discipline had denied my body the food it craved, but my brain had refused to cooperate and had overridden my will by urging me to eat in a subconscious state. She told me not to worry, though, that she could treat that. Armed with this knowledge and her support, and the support of my family, I felt that I could finally win this war.
Hey, my name is Rachel. In high school, the homecoming dance was coming up. I happened to confide that I had a crush on a popular guy to another girl in my class. Unbeknownst to me, they were very, very good friends, and this girl offered to put in a good word for me. The next day, she told me my crush would totally say yes if I asked him. So, in between periods, I found my crush in the hallway, asked him to the homecoming dance, and he said yes. Well, homecoming is on Saturday. Today is Thursday. My crush, his friend, and we went to lunch together, and I offered to pay in the hopes that this will make them like me even more. And yes, I was that bad. They tell me they want 2 bags of chips, burgers, fries, and 2 small cartons of chocolate milk. No problem. I go to the cafeteria and get those items like a boss. For some reason, I decided to jog over to them, even though that really only shaves off 10 minutes from my trip, but I still did it. I had 2 bags of chips in my mouth, one in my hand with a burger and fries, the other hand with 2 cartons of chocolate milk. They are sitting in the common area. The common area is carpeted, parallel to the cafeteria, which had a tile floor. These rooms are separated by a relatively small metal line on the floor, and as I meet that line, my left foot catches on the metal. No problem, I have another foot. I will just swing that foot forward real quick and save this. But no, the other foot also catches. As I fall straight forward, I try to catch myself with my hands. Well, one hand had the chocolate milk in it, which just burst out, sending chocolate milk in every single direction. My other hand didn't help me either. It slipped on the burger in the bag and the fries go all over the place. The last thing to break my fall was actually my own face.
the face with two bags of potato chips in my mouth. You know those jokes about chips bags being full of air? Well, they're actually true. As my face collided with the ground, both the bags of chips exploded at the same exact time and it sounded like a gunshot. Somehow one of my shoes just flew off. I tried to melt into the ground and fade out of existence for a moment, and this happened at the meeting point of the common room and the cafeteria. So everyone in both rooms either saw or heard this fiasco and looked over. About 100 students. It's deadly silent for a couple of seconds, and then comes the laughter. And dear God, the laughter. It was like a jet engine. Every person there was laughing the hardest they have ever laughed in their whole lives. I even saw the janitor doubled over laughing, bracing himself with a mop handle. A teacher was trying to walk over to help me, but she stopped every couple of feet to use her whole body to laugh at me. All of this happens not 10 feet away from the table in which my crush and his friends were sitting. Everyone is having a great laugh, but my crush has the greatest laugh of all. He has fallen to the ground, with one hand bracing himself on his knees. The other hand is clutched at his ribs as he laughs so hard that no sound comes out. He was wheezing like a dolphin. There is no recovery from this. I walked to the bathroom to clean myself up. The teacher could only manage to hand me my shoe along the way and continue laughing. In the bathroom, the laughter did not die at all for what seemed like a lifetime. When the bell rang, I was still in the bathroom and people were still laughing. While I spent the whole day wallowing in easily the most embarrassing moment of my life, I thought, well, maybe I'm just a funny girl and he will like it. The next morning, I see my crush before class and he walks up to me and he says, "So homecoming is tomorrow." Eager not to speak about the shit show that happened yesterday, I just excitedly said, "Yes, yes, it is." And then he delivers a crisp and says, so this girl that I actually like asked me to go to the dance with her, so I think I'm gonna go. To which I replied, yeah, that makes sense. I totally did not go in the bathroom and cry after that. Anyways, my crush said he will go to homecoming with me. The day before, I tripped with his lunch and face planted into a pool of random ingredients in front of the entire class. My crush did not go to the homecoming dance with me.
I'm a musician. Not a terribly great one, but still, I consider myself a musician. I know my way around an instrument or two. More importantly, I'm a collector. I love collecting things, starting from coins to lottery tickets. There's no rhyme or reason to my collection. It consists of anything uniquely interesting I can get my hands on. That is why when I saw an ad on Craigslist for a vintage, rustic, red piano, I could not help but reach out to the seller. The ad's title seemed normal enough. It said, "Old Piano, Read a Good Home." It was nothing out of the ordinary, and not something that would normally grab my attention. Still, I felt a strange need to click on it. Perhaps I was bored, or maybe I just wanted to see what it looked like. Either way, I gave in to the temptation. There was no picture, just a story. It read something like this: "I'm offering my piano to anyone who is willing to come and pick it up. It is very old, but still playable. I can prove this upon your arrival. It is red and has no brand markings. This is because it was made by my great grandfather. It is one of a kind. He went out himself and chopped down a redwood tree to provide the material to build it. It took him many days to finally cut down the tree and much, much longer to finish making the piano. Nearly his entire life was put into this thing. I, however, have no use for it. It has been passed down in my family many times over. I have no wish to continue the tradition, and the piano is currently taking too much space in my home. I want it gone as quickly as possible. You can reach me by phone at the number listed below. Margaret. Reading the ad sparked my curiosity. One of a kind? Redwood tree? How strange and absurd! I had to see this thing. If it was half as remarkable as Margaret's description, then it was a must have for my ever growing collection. As such, I decided to give her a call. Margaret answered the phone after the first ring and immediately asked, "Is this about the piano?" She was thrilled to hear I was interested. I too was thrilled, happy to know it was still available. We set up a time the next day for me to come over and take a look at it. I hung up the phone, excited as I could be. I had a feeling this piano would become the new masterpiece of my collection. Being a musician, I own countless instruments, too many to list. Each time I acquired a new item, my heart would race with excitement. The piano was no different. I couldn't wait to see it in person. I woke up the following day with no resistance to my alarm, starting my daily routine in an effort to minimize the time between me and Margaret. She said she was an early bird and that I could swing by early. With that in mind, I showered, brushed my teeth, and got dressed at a record pace. I made it out the door roughly 25 minutes after getting out of bed. It might sound silly to be so worked up over a material object, but to that I'd say, you must not be a collector. Seeing this piano in person was my mission, and it was one I intended to see through the end. I found myself at Margaret's home within an hour. It was a small cottage at a dead end road, surrounded by a forest. There was an old tire swing in the backyard, indicating that it may have been where Margaret grew up. I wonder if her parents passed away and left her the house. Maybe the piano reminded her of them, and that was the real reason why she was getting rid of it. My speculation was interrupted by a woman racing out of the cottage to greet me. She signaled for me to come inside and went back in herself. This was with no doubt Margaret. I hadn't introduced myself in any way, but it wasn't likely that she received many visitors, and that's most likely because of where she lives. Eager to see the piano, I quickly jumped out of my car and made my way up to the stone walkway to the front door. Entering the house, Margaret seemed overjoyed to see me. It was overwhelming, but made things a little less awkward. She rushed me over to the room with the piano. She was so excited to show it to me, just as I was excited to see it. I matched her pace as we made our way up there. Upon entering, I stopped dead in my tracks. It was a beautiful concoction of wood and ivory, the likes of which I've never seen before. It had such a striking red color with a bold finish, and the design was mind blowing. Simple, yet elegant. Highly original, and certainly one of a kind, like Margaret stated in her ad. I stood there for a moment. Margaret mistook my reaction for disinterest, quickly going off on a sales pitch about its charm and history and so on. She then sat down at its stool and placed her hands over the keys. "I tuned it yesterday after your call. Let's hear how it sounds." Margaret played a beautiful piece. In addition to playing, she also sang. This is when I took my attention away from the piano and allowed myself to notice her. She was young, maybe in her 20s. Her singing voice, accompanied by the wonderfully rich tone of the piano, has totally captivated me in a way that I can't put into words. I allowed myself to be taken by the song until she finished. Before I could compliment her, Margaret continued her well rehearsed sales pitch. I don't know if it was her playing or her voice, but I was sold the minute she touched the keys. Because of this, I interrupted her. I'll take it. She was astounded when I said this. Really? You will? Wonderful. We were both happy and everything seemed fine. But one fact kept creeping and crawling at the back of my mind. The history of each piece in my collection is very important to me, and the piano had gaps that needed to be filled. So, have you lived in this house your whole life? I asked, secretly fishing for information. Yes, as did my parents. This house is very old, older than the piano. And your great grandfather, he lived here as well? I asked. Yes, he did. Well, redwoods don't grow everywhere, and they're truly massive. It seems unlikely that he would have made the trek out there or even have been able to chop one down, especially with the many trees here at his disposal. It was at this point that Margaret realized I had caught her in a lie. She apologized to me, and she came clean. It would seem that the piano was made from a red tree, just not redwood. Instead, it was a strange tree located deep in a nearby forest. Being a historian, Margaret's great grandfather knew all about it. This particular tree was a local legend, and it had always been his dream to find it. It was known as the Blood Tree, a sacred place. Anyone who touched it was said to live a long life filled with luck. Those who wounded it, however, would forever know fear and misfortune. Her great grandfather, of course, fell into the latter category. Though she claimed not to believe in the legend, she was worried the curse would scare off anyone who wanted it. Dark past or not, I still wanted it. Despite Margaret's deception, I attempted to offer her money. She wouldn't have it, insisting I just take the thing off her hands. That would have been fine, but I couldn't bring myself to offer nothing in return. Eventually, I convinced her and handed over an envelope with a decent amount of money in it. She accepted and helped me lift the thing into the back of my truck. I waved and drove off, satisfied with my purchase. Later on, with the help of a friend, I positioned it in the perfect spot in my living room. I had a new piece for the collection and I couldn't be happier. Or so I thought. For a few days, my life continued as it normally did. My routine remained unchanged. The only difference was the new piece that grabbed my attention whenever I entered the room. After a while, I barely noticed it was there. Despite its beauty, it soon blended in with the rest of my home, much like the other items in my collection. One night, however, changed everything. I had just gone to bed when a loud bang downstairs jolted and freaked me out. I jumped out of bed and took a moment to breathe. The sound was unmistakably the piano's fallboard slamming shut over the keys. That could easily happen on its own had I left it open, and that was not the case. I hadn't played the piano once since I bought it. So what created the sound? I raced downstairs and hoped to put my mind at ease. What I found was horrifying. The piano's fallboard was up. Not only had it not shut over the keys, but it was open despite my never touching it. Confusion swam through my brain, but soon submitted to the clutches of late night tiredness. To make sense of things, I shut the fallboard and went back to bed. Nothing to worry about. The next day was pretty normal at first. I woke up early, took a shower, brushed my teeth, and started my commute. I worked and dealt with the stress that came along with it, just as I always did. The piano was the farthest thing from my mind. It wasn't until I got home that it crept its way back in. Upon opening the door to my house, I was greeted with a cold gust that rushed out from within. I hadn't left the AC on, so that was strange. I walked into the living room and put my jacket on the couch. I then looked up and noticed the piano. The full board? It was up. That could not be true. I shut it the night before. Had someone break in? I ran around my house with a kitchen knife in my hand, ready to attack. There was no one. After checking every inch of my house, I eventually found myself back in the living room in front of the piano. The fall board was now down. Was I going mad? No, of course not. This was just the byproduct of an exhausted, overworked mind, nothing more. At least, that's what I told myself to keep from dwelling on it. Still somewhat freaked out, I went to my bedroom for some quality sleep. A good end to a bad day. This time, you get to know the truth about the haunted piano. I left. I went to work. Then I came home and went to bed. Everything was back to normal, just as I told myself it was. Music started playing again. That's when it hit me. This was not paranormal. It couldn't be. It was a cheap trick. Margaret must have programmed the piano to play itself. It was just a prank. A laugh at my expense. That's why the damn thing was free. I ran downstairs to solve the mystery once and for all. Like clockwork, as soon as my foot touched the bottom step, the piano stopped playing. I walked over to it, confident in my new theory. Upon opening it up and exploring all of it, I was surprised by what I saw. It was just a normal piano. Nothing extra was added in its creation to make it play on its own. My calmness was not calm anymore. I stared at the red wood and ivory keys before me and almost felt compelled to ask, "What are you?" Instead, I remained silent. This silence, however, was quickly interrupted by the sound of music as the piano began playing itself once again. I wanted to run, but fear kept me still. I watched the horror unfold. The keys were being pressed down hard, controlled by an unseen force. A haunting peace filled the room as pictures fell from the walls. The house began to shake around me. My eyes darted back and forth in fear. But then I noticed something outside. Standing at my window was a shadowy figure. I ran outside to escape the madness. All the while the song went on. The house continued to shake behind me. The dark figure was nowhere to be seen. Margaret has not rigged the piano to play on its own, but I was not losing my marbles either. This was something entirely different, something out of this world. All at once, the music stopped playing, and the world around me with it. No wind, no cars, no animals, and no people. Nothing. It was the middle of the night at this point, but where were the crickets, the frogs, or even the trees? Where was life outside my home? A little exploration revealed that I was truly by myself. Every living creature in the world had disappeared. What the hell was going on? Why was this happening? I returned home, hoping for answers, but instead, I saw an unsettling sight. It was so dark, I almost didn't see it. Standing completely still next to the piano was the same silhouette from my window. My body was shaking with fear, but the figure did not react. It was frozen like the rest of the world. The shadow was wearing a dark cloak, one that covered its entire body. At its face was nothing but pure darkness. I studied the figure for a few more moments before a familiar sound filled the room. The piano song played, and in an instant, the world returned to life. I fell to the ground, but managed to escape, crawling out the front door and rushing over to my car. I got in and took off with no specific location in mind, happy to be anywhere that was not my own home. I started weighing my options. Destroying the piano came to mind, but the risk outweighed the reward. It could just as easily backfire, angering whatever spirit was hunting its keys. Seeking help wasn't really an option either. The only person who might believe me was Margaret. That was it. Margaret. Maybe she would know what to do. It was late, but I didn't care. I drove over to her place. The dark figure was there, standing at her door. Before I could turn in the opposite direction, it grabbed me by the arm with its bony fingers. Its strength kept me anchored in place, and then it disappeared. I had no choice but to return home. I hesitantly stepped past the piano and walked up to my bedroom, where I locked the door and fell into bed, mentally exhausted. I would not have even a moment of peace, as the song started up again the second my head hit the pillow. But I remained still, sick of the repetition. The banging on my bedroom door that followed, however, succeeded in freaking me out. I jumped out of bed and pushed my dresser to the door, and I hid under my sheet. The banging persisted, but I chose to instead focus on the song, allowing myself to properly listen to it for the first time. Surprisingly enough, it was beautiful. Dark, but beautiful. Its melody soothed me, relaxing me to the point that my eyes grew tired. I fell asleep and I had a dream. The dream world I found myself in was different. It was overwhelmingly vivid and real. Words like surreal and otherworldly just don't cut it. The awareness I had is also difficult to explain. I was completely aware of my surroundings in the sense that I could feel everything about them. I know that doesn't make much sense, but it's the only description I have to offer. The dream was in a forest. It was large, and at its center, a large red tree stood tall. Every fiber of my being knew where I was. This was the blood tree, the precursor to my piano. As I admired the beauty of the blood tree, a person stepped out from behind. He did not speak. He simply pointed at the tree. This is when the piano leaked into my dream. The song played as glowing lines ran up and down the tree's bark. The man put his hand to the wood, motioning for me to do the same, and I did. It was an incredible sensation. My eyes were filled with visions, a glimpse into the blood tree's past. Its bark wasn't always red. Native habitats came up to the tree every year. They would slice their hands open and place them on the tree's trunk. Their blood then dripped to its base, representing the lifelines of their people. It also signified becoming one with nature, feeding the tree life from within. It was the anchor that kept their community together. This is where they gathered and enjoyed life. A place free from worry, a safe place. This was also where the natives buried their dead. After that, one of the elders would play a song, the same song my piano played every night. It was their song of death. When it was all over, a final offering of blood was taken from the fallen and painted on the blood tree, granting their spirits safe passage to the afterlife. When the vision stopped, my new friend released his hand from the bark and pulled out an unusual instrument. He began playing the song of death, but then stopped. He handed it to me and motioned for me to play instead. I wasn't sure what he was up to, but felt no need to deny his wishes. With little practice, I was able to get the hang of the instrument and play the song. As I played, the blood tree began wilting, its bark changing from red to black. My friend was ecstatic. For one reason or another, this is what he wanted. It wasn't until I woke up later in bed that the pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Margaret's grandfather had taken away the natives' headstone. He violated their connection to nature as well as with one another. The tree and its spirits had to be put to rest, and once and for all, there was only one way to do this. I can't explain how, but I knew I needed to play the Song of Death on the piano the whole way through without interruption. It was the only thing that would break the curse. I ran downstairs and put my plan into action. When my hands touched the keys, the house violently shook, knocking frames and furniture all over the place. I kept my composure. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the dark figure standing at my window again. Still, I continued. I had an obligation to preserve, if not for the tree or its ghosts, then for myself. The nightmare had to end. They roamed around the room, sometimes next to me, other times breathing down my neck. I paid no attention on the outside, but my bones were shaking. I had come too far to lose my balance now. Just as the shadowy figure sat next to me at the piano, I struck the final note of the song. The madness around me stopped. I turned to the figure beside me, and it was the native from my dream. He threw me a thankful smile before vanishing. My work was done. Months have passed, and the piano remains in my living room, quieter than it's ever been before. I even play it from time to time. If there's one thing you can take away from my experience, it's to be mindful of the things that make sounds at night. Try your best not to be frightened, and please let this tale be a warning to you. Don't ever buy strange things from Craigslist. You'll thank me later.
Hello, my name is Brenda, and this is how I embarrassed myself when I was about 14 years old. Before I tell you my story, let me highlight a few points. All teens experience some amount of anxiety at times. It is actually a normal reaction to stress, and sometimes it even helps them deal with overwhelming situations. For many teens, things like public speaking, final exams, or even going out on a date can cause feelings of anxiety. For some teens, however, anxiety can go beyond these typical symptoms to negatively affect friendships, participation in activities, and even their schoolwork. And do not get me started on how being a teenager is made of the devil's blood. Okay, that was an innocent joke, but I do mean it. So, back to our story. I was sitting in class behind the cutest guy in my grade. His name was Josh, and I just wanted to ask for his phone number, but I was painfully shy and terribly afraid of being rejected. But it was almost time for the school dance. I wanted to go with him, but there was no way on earth I could have done it face to face. I tried to talk myself through the anxiety and convinced myself to actually go through with it. I debated with myself for a while, missing most of that day's in class instructions before I finally decided to ask him. And I did. I did ask Josh for his number, and he agreed. He slowly took my phone, typed in his number, and handed it back to me. I felt relieved. I had finally gotten the number. I mean, I was wrong. There was nothing to be anxious about. I had made it much worse in my mind than it actually was. It was actually nice to realize I was anxious over nothing, to be over it and have his number. I got home later that day and I was so excited to call or text Josh. But because I'm socially awkward, I decided to try and text him. But the message didn't deliver. I checked the number he gave me and noticed that it included the digits 911, which indicated to me that he had given me a fake number. Maybe he was trying to avoid me. I suddenly became aware of how weird I had acted towards him. I didn't have much of a relationship with the guy before asking for his number. There was no rapport between us, so it came across as creepy when I asked him. I also asked him in the middle of class by tapping him on the shoulder. There was nothing smooth or even normal about how I went about it. I hadn't acted immoral, but it was painfully awkward, socially inappropriate, and thus doomed to fail. The encounter was painful, but from it I suppose I learned some lessons on how to appropriately socialize. I also learned that it is incredibly easy to miss obvious signs that other people are giving you when you're anxious, because you're so absorbed with yourself that you miss social cues. Looking back at how he was clearly uncomfortable with my request, which he made clear by not smiling and by hesitating in agreeing to type the number. Had I gotten out of my head and paid attention, I might have noticed how he was acting and how that clearly reflected how he felt about me and our interaction. It makes me question, is having high functioning anxiety easier than being trapped in your own shell, frozen with anxiety? It may be the lesser of two evils, but for me, this experience turned into purpose, and it built my self confidence. I see it as a step, but then improving self esteem and self worth will have you high functioning without anxiety. That is the end game. But you know what? Write your own script. You can't go on if someone else is writing your script. And I know that a lot of kids at school felt the same way. They didn't feel good, and I didn't know why. Kids will relate, and this is so freaky, and it makes anxiety even worse. You have to go to know that you are okay in school, and you cannot know unless you go. Getting over anxiety is not some hippie mumbo jumbo, and it took me years to get over what I call life fright. And I learned that the very hard way. Now, does the devil joke make sense?
My name is Ricardo. Though I am a 21-year-old, my body is the size of a 10-year-old boy because I was born with a disease called Prader-Willi syndrome, PWS, which stunted my body growth while allowing my mind to continue developing. Most people would consider PWS to be a curse, but it was a gift for Dad and me because we took advantage of this situation. My story starts when Dad's company accused him of embezzlement and fired him. The scandal and shame of this incident kept him from getting any other type of work, so we left our country to start a new life elsewhere. Dad was still unable to get a job because his old company always gave him bad references when called by prospective new employers. Dad was worried about our future, so he improvised and came up with a scheme to turn me into the goose that laid the golden egg. You see, children always bullied me due to my small body size. Luckily, my mature mind helped me avoid fights most of the time. One day, Dad asked me if I wanted to become famous, and I said, sure. He told me that we needed a way to gain people's sympathy, and he explained his plan. We went to the garage and found some old torn clothes that he asked me to wear. Then he poured dirty water on me. Then he made a recording of me crying and explaining that I had been beaten by some bullies in our neighborhood. After we finished making our sympathy-garnering video, he applauded my performance and posted it to the internet to see what reaction we would get. The next day, our video went viral, and I became an instant celebrity. All the news agencies gave the video broad coverage, and I began receiving sympathetic phone calls and donations from around the world. Several international schools offered me free scholarships at their schools, and I managed to amass a good size of money from all the donations, and for a moment, I thought our days of poverty were finally over. Unfortunately, the authorities investigated my background and found that I was 21 years old and not really a kid at all. Then all my fortunes reversed themselves, and the police came after me for fraud. I am speaking to you now from a hotel room as I hide from the police. I have enough money to head to another country, preferably one that has no extradition treaty with my country. I have enough money to live comfortably without needing to work for the rest of my life. So, on balance, I don't have any regrets about what I've done. I adore detective adventures and solving puzzles that others can't. I'm crazy about this. I love challenges and mysteries. I'm Ramon. But my father's nickname for me is Megamind. I'm 14 years old, and I'm typically ranked number 1 in my class every year. I have become famous for solving riddles. Many comers have tried to unseat me, but all have failed. I love to examine minute details. But let me get on with telling you my story. One hot summer, we had just finished our exams at school and were going on summer break. So I organized a trip to the beach with my friends. Beach weather is amazing. Clear skies, cool ocean breezes, sand, and sun. Just amazing. One day, before my beach trip, my mother handed me a letter from my grandmother. I was surprised and thought it was a little weird because Granny owned a hotel in the surrounding area nearby. It had wonderful views all around it. I had opened the letter, which read, "Dear Ramon, how are you? I hope you're enjoying your summer break. Would you mind spending a couple of days with me? I have a serious matter that I would like to discuss with you. Granny." Initially, I thought that it was probably some silly matter, but then my inner voice told me that it might be important. I was conflicted between going on my beach trip or visiting my granny. I decided to visit Granny first. She was family after all, so off I went. Though my grandmother lived in a beautiful area, the closer I got to the hotel, the more my inner voice was nagging me. When I arrived at the hotel, Granny was waiting for me. She smiled and hugged me. I had missed her so much. She had company. Raul, her maintenance man, and Malika, her housekeeper and assistant. There weren't any guests in the hotel at the time, and I asked her why. Her face changed, and she said that was what she wanted to speak to me about. So we went to her room to talk. She then proceeded to tell me that the hotel was haunted. "Haunted?" I exclaimed. "What makes you think that?" Granny said, "The hotel has evil spirits that frighten the guests at night." I didn't want to believe it, but I knew Granny was a rational person. I suspected there was more to this than meets the eye, so I decided to investigate this intriguing mystery. On my first night at the hotel, I waited until midnight. Then I lit a candle and walked through the halls of the hotel. There were photos on the wall, and I could hear whispering and the rustle of the leaves outside. It was a little spooky and unsettling, and made my blood run cold. Suddenly, I heard laughing on both sides of the hotel, and a shadow passed quickly in front of my eyes. Unnerved, I quickly returned to my room, where soon afterwards I heard something scratching on my door. I kept thinking to myself, I am not afraid. I am not afraid. Then the door began opening slowly. I saw a hand on the doorknob. Then the owner of the hand came into view. It was a cloaked, headless man holding a candle. I fainted. The next day, I woke up to find Granny and Malika standing beside me. Granny told me that I had been sleeping a long time. I asked what had happened, and they told me they heard me scream and came to my aid. When they found me, I was unconscious on the floor. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. It was Raul bringing me a drink. That was when I noticed something strange about Raul's face. It was emotionless. Then I glanced at his hands as I accepted the drink from him. That night, I again walked around the hotel. I found some steps at the end of a corridor that led to the basement. Down in the basement, I opened a maintenance door and found a tape recorder and a pile of clothes on a table. Suddenly, the lights went out. I was groping around in the dark and trying to find my way back when I heard the laughing again. Still, I continued stumbling ahead through the dark. I stepped on an electrical line and tore it off the wall. I returned to my room. My door opened slowly. I was hiding behind the door. I grabbed the loose electrical detonator and touched it to the doorknob. It was live, and I heard a grunt from the owner of the hand on the other side of the door as he or she was shocked. And I heard him or her fall to the floor. It took me a while to find the electrical panel, but I managed to get the lights back on. When I did, I found Raul laying unconscious on the floor next to the doorknob that I had electrified. I called Granny and Malika down to the basement. Granny asked what had happened. I replied, "Granny, you really need to screen your employees better. Raul was your ghost." Granny looked shocked and asked me what made me think that. I explained that the hand on my drink today was the same hand I saw on the headless ghost that opened my hotel room door the night before. I also found tools, a tape recorder, and some ghost clothes down here in the basement. In addition, I found the earphones that had been placed around the hotel. Granny was shocked. Raoul woke up about that time, and she grilled Raoul. "Why are you scaring all my guests away, Raoul?" He said, "This hotel used to belong to my family, but you bought it from my grandfather. Well, I wanted it back. Please forgive me." Malika said, "We have to call the police." But I said, "No, wait, I have an idea. Let's renovate and reopen the hotel with a new name. The Haunted Hotel. Our advertising slogan will be, spend a night in a haunted hotel." Raoul can do his ghost thing with the whispers and the laughing. Why, he can even flicker the lights off and on at a random time once or twice a night just to give the hotel a spooky atmosphere. The idea proved to be a big hit. The haunted hotel attracted many tourists, and Granny's business prospered. I had a nice holiday and still managed to fit in my trip to the beach on my summer break.
Hello there, my name is Pearls. The first day of my professional life was the worst professional day ever. During my first year at college, I wanted to spare my parents some of the expenses. So I took a job, and it happened to be the closest thing I could get to my dream job. It was an office that was mainly concerned with planning fashion shows. I know I was only an intern at the moment, but I have never been so excited in my life. I was actually studying fashion designing, so lucky me. But since we all know that life isn't always pink and roses, I had a repulsive boss. Let's call her Jane. I was Employee of the Month 3 times in a row. My life couldn't get any better. Well, except for Jane, who always thought I made her the worst coffee ever, yet she still drinks it. The closest colleague I had at work was a guy named Mark. I also had a tiny little crush on him, but that is not our point here. Anyways, I was supposed to organize a huge event, and so Jane sent an extra long office-wide email giving out details about the event and the brand and who was assigned to do what. I was ecstatic. I was running around the office like a busy bee that had to make sure everything was in place. After a long, tiring day, I was at my desk, rereading the email she sent and enjoying a good cup of coffee. And guess what? Jane had about a gazillion typos, and to be honest, I wanted something to cool me off after doing so much. And being the smart employee that I am, I wanted to crack a good joke and maybe, just maybe, get Mark to laugh. I wrote a sarcastic, full of mockery email, and once I've hit send, I heard gasps echoing around the office, and I realized that I had clicked reply all. Jane called and wanted to see me at her office. My knees were all spaghetti-like, and I wore my heart down my sleeve. And to my greatest surprise, Jane took it too well. She told me, and I'm quoting, "I think you have a great sense of humor." She even offered me to become her own personal assistant and the big event hostess. And not after a long time, Jane had ruined my promotion happiness. She showered me with paperwork that I had to stay up until 1 in the morning to get done. And when the big day was finally here and I was getting ready for the event, I got a bit too excited and I went to the office all dressed up. I saw Mark and tried to act as smooth as I could. Well, I tripped over and I ripped off my dress. Jane came out of her office at the same exact moment, and again she saved my life. She lent me one of her super expensive dresses that I'm sure it cost her a big fortune. And that, my friends, was one mistake that I have totally nailed.
Hey everyone, my name's Gwen. My story is different from anything you've ever heard before in your life. We all have grandparents, and we all love them very much. When they die, they leave an empty space in our hearts. It's never easy. My grandpa died a year ago. Before he died, he left me an old weird-looking chest, which I never thought to open before, until today. I opened the chest, but all I found in it were 2 pieces of paper. One of them had only 2 words, Grandpa's house, and the other had a map drawn on it. I thought for a while. Then I decided to go to my grandpa's old house and check things out. So I went to the house. As I took out the key to open the door opened wide. There was no one else there. I was scared, but I was curious to find out more about the map. So I went in. As soon as I got inside, the door slammed shut behind me. I was shocked and scared, but I wasn't gonna back out now. The house looked so creepy and eerie, like it was abandoned for 100 years, and it felt so cold, cold, like standing on ice. I opened the map in my hands and looked around. It showed the inside of the house. I followed the path till I reached a door. When I stood in front of it, it opened slowly on its own. Terrified, I took 2 steps back, but I glimpsed a shadow inside, so I moved forward. I stepped in, but with nothing under my feet, I fell, rolling over down the stairs. It wasn't a room, it was the basement. I tried to get up, but there was something on my legs. Of course, it was too dark to see what it was. Every time I take it off, it falls back again. I looked for my phone, but it wasn't in my pocket. Oddly enough, when I looked again, it was there. I took it out, and I turned on the flashlight, and there was my surprise. On my legs was the bony arm of a skeleton. I kicked it away and stood up quick. I lit around the room with my phone, but it was full of skeletons all over. Of course, no need to tell you I was scared the heck out of my wits. What happened next was beyond the understanding of an average person. The eyes of one of the skeletons turned bright red, and they were staring right at me. My feet started moving backwards automatically, and I found 2 bony hands clasping my neck. I freaked out, but then, suddenly, all the skeletons moved and stood in 2 lines, clearing a path for me. The map in my hand was glowing and indicating a place in the room. I moved towards it, slowly, as my knees buckled together. There was a huge chest. When I opened it, I found a ton-load of money. Strangely enough, all the skeletons had disappeared, and the furniture in the room was floating around the air. I got scared, and I ran for it, but I came to the stairs, and I found the door locked. It wouldn't open. The skeletons appeared around me once again, and they were pulling me off the stairs. I soared through the air and landed on the chest. Then I was out cold. When I came to, I found myself inside the chest, like it was a coffin of some sort, and I was lying inside, feeling numb all over. I could see the sky, but it was cloudy. I felt like I was being buried. Then I heard a voice. It said, "Welcome to your grandpa's treasure." This is what happens to people like me, dumb people like me, who follow a stupid map to look for their grandpa's worthless treasure. They'll tell you their stories from their graves.
Do you remember me? Probably not. I'm the girl that can see the future from Wendy's story. I cannot use my real name for safety purposes. For now, call me Sarah. I might have sounded evil or even crazy in Wendy's story, but believe me, this is not even close to the truth. Let me tell you about myself. I come from an extremely strict family. I'm not allowed to have friends, I'm not allowed to leave the house except for school, and I'm barely allowed to access the internet. I live with my mom, my dad, and my much younger brother. I wouldn't say we're homeless, but we are poor. I discovered my power when I saved my mom's life one time. I was only a kid, and we were picking up my brother from daycare. Right before my mom crossed the street, I blacked out and had my very first vision. I ran out of the car and screamed for her to stop. The second she froze in her place, there was a car accident. She could have died. She cried and hugged me, but never cared to ask how it happened. We're not a close family, so I never told anyone. I kept having those visions ever since. Years later, I learned how to control them. The few minutes of internet I was allowed, I always tried to look for a reason why or how I got my power. I never got an answer. I needed a distraction because I felt lost and like I did not belong. Now that I'm finally in high school, I asked my parents if I could have a part time job after school. They never gave me any money, and to be honest, I needed some. I knew they were going to say no, but to my surprise, they agreed on one condition that I give them half of my paycheck. I agreed. I got a job as a waitress in a local restaurant, and it was weird dealing with new people, but it was also so exciting. I quickly made a couple of friends who worked with me. I couldn't bring myself to trust them, but at least I had someone to talk to. One day at the restaurant, I heard some customers talking about something called the dark web. I wondered what it was. After my shift, I casually mentioned it to one of my colleagues. He explained everything to me. It was on my mind day and night. It sounded like a place full of weird people, just like me. With my first paycheck, I bought a new phone and kept it a secret from my parents. I immediately used it to access the dark web. It didn't look scary to me. I entered the chat room and decided I wanted to tell my secret to a stranger. You know what they say. Confide your heart to a stranger. The guy seemed harmless, and he actually listened to me. Next day, I found an email from an unknown address. It was a picture of my house. I got so scared, and I turned off my phone. I went to school, and when I came back, my phone was turned on. There was another email, and it read, "You're going to help us accomplish a few missions. You'll get your share of the money. Meet me at this address at 11 p.m. tonight. If you try to act smart, you'll regret it." I had no idea what to do, but I knew I had to go. I snuck out that night and met the person from the email. He wore a mask and he threw some pictures at me. They were pictures of my family members. The first thing he said was, "Do you want them dead?" I shook my head. He said, "A quick test. What's going to happen in a few seconds?" I opened my eyes wide and said, "A black car will come pick us up." He nodded his head in approval. He blindfolded me and put me in the car. After a few minutes, he said, "You're coming with me. The guys here will do the work, and you will guide us." I nodded my head, even though I didn't know what he was talking about. Much later, they drove me back to the same address, gave me some cash, and threw me out the car. I removed the blindfold, and it was already morning. I had to run back home before my parents wake up, and that was the first of many, many missions to come. For a minute there, I enjoyed the thrill and the cash. Sometimes it was too much, and sometimes I had to skip school. And of course, I quit my job. I worked for them for what seemed like a year, until what I feared the most happened. The gang I worked for asked me to help them track a person so they can kill him. It was not a matter of choice. It's either I help them or they kill me and my whole family. I tried to ignore the email. However, an hour later, a server appeared on my phone. It was titled, "We See You," and it was full of pictures from inside my house. 30 seconds later, the page dropped and disappeared. I can't even tell the police. I can't do anything. That is when it occurred to me that the only untraceable person in the whole world is Wendy. Next day at school, I looked all around for her. I finally ran into her in the bathroom. I couldn't utter a word. I only had one hope, that she would hear my thoughts. I focused as hard as I can to think loud and clear. Wendy was fixing her lipstick in the mirror, and after a few minutes, she dropped her lipstick and looked at me. I begged her inside my head to keep her mouth shut. She blinked twice and left. The mission is happening in 24 hours. What if Wendy can't help? I didn't get a second of sleep that night. I know you think I'm a bad person, and I won't argue much, but killing someone was crossing the line. I wanted to get out of this long ago, and I couldn't. Now I have to help them kill an innocent person? Time just flew by. I got an email, and I had to drag myself to meet them. Their big boss looked at me and said, "This time you'll get cash and a fake degree. So stop acting like a baby and get to work." I nodded. I thought about giving them wrong information, but I knew I'll get caught. A sniper was waiting for a signal from me to shoot. I was only a few feet away from the victim. I was shaking nonstop. Right before I gave the signal, I heard the police siren. I looked at the sniper and he was about to shoot. I jumped and knocked the innocent man down, but I got shot in the arm. In the blink of an eye, the gang disappeared into thin air. Police called paramedics, and to my surprise, Wendy was here. She practically saved my life. Or are they going to find me and kill me and my family? The police confiscated my phone. My wound was properly taken care of, and they called my parents. To this point, I was not interrogated yet. My parents came, and they couldn't look me in the eyes. A police officer explained what happened and told them, "She's staying with us until further notice." And they all left. Well, except for Wendy. Her dad was cool enough to let her stay with me until police asked her to leave. She looked at me and said, "You owe me one, gangster." And we both laughed. A police officer came and informed us that Wendy will have to stay here as well, for her own safety. She looked at me and whispered, "We'll have a gang of our own when all of this is over." I smiled and didn't say anything. Wendy's face got serious and she asked me, "How am I gonna explain to them what happened in details? We cannot just tell the police we have superpowers." Before I could answer, a police officer came in and took her for questioning. Now, we're both in trouble with the dark web gang and the police. Wendy came back and they took me. She whispered, "We're doomed." I thought to myself so that Wendy could hear me say, "Oh, you think we're doomed? Wait until the gang finds us, and they will." I left the room feeling scared as ever. Do you guys think we'll ever be safe again? Do you think I got Wendy in trouble? Can I ever make up for the mess I made? If you want to know what happened to us, let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Hello, my name is Kate. Now I'm going to say this. I am by no means a saint, and the only reason I brought this up is later in the story. So, I dated this guy in high school for 2 years. He was the love of my life, and I planned on marrying him. His dad became super controlling, and eventually he forced us to break up. He immediately got into a relationship with another girl, and I moved on. Later on, I met this guy who we will call Max, and he was a mix between country and scene. He liked artists like Lil Peep and also was in love with horses. He had a girlfriend who lived across the country, but we stayed friends. They eventually broke up, and naturally, we both grew closer. Dear God, I regret ever saying yes to going out with him. The first 2 months, they were constant fighting. He wanted us to visit his ex-girlfriend because she was failing college and addicted to coke while we were together. He would sometimes text her while he was at my house or while we were at dinner, but eventually he quit. The next few months were okay at best. He would constantly start fights with my male friends and even assumed I was cheating on him with one friend who at the time did have a crush on me. But I'm a very loyal person who went as far as to put more of my time into hanging out with my boyfriend than my friends. Eventually, we went on a cruise and he got high with a group of girls and kissed one of them. I cut it off and went on to date others. So, he texted me 3 months after breaking up, saying he wants to talk and apologize for what he did. I was still in love with him, so I agreed and we set up a time for when he could come over. I knew instantly when he pulled into my driveway that I was going to regret ever responding. There was no hug, no "I miss you," none of that. Instead, he walks up to me, looks me in the eye, and says, "I want to get this out of the way. I've dated a lot of people since we broke up." Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I mean, I did the same when we broke up. So I kind of agreed to being just friends and never go back to talking about getting back together for now. But then comes the bullshit. He calls me one night and says, "Hey, I want to get back with you. Because honestly, wandering around is boring.
and I don't want to jump into things instantly. And I was wondering if dating without labels would be okay with you. When I asked him to elaborate, he replied, as in, I can still go to dinner with other girls, you can go to dinner with other guys, and we'll see what happens. Needless to say, I hung up without saying a word. Told him thanks, but no thanks. You are not who you used to be, and I'm not interested anymore. Bonus chapter. He stopped a few weeks, but he would periodically send me pictures of him at parties or on dates with other girls or pictures of his private areas. Anyways, ever since he has been blocked on everything, but I just thought I would share this with you. This is a shout out to every girl out there. Please find someone that's worth your love and affection, not someone who wants to play with it.
My name is Keanu, and I'm 13 years old. I am a psychopath. I freely admit it in front of all of you. I attribute my sickness solely to my father, because any story about a cruel father pales in comparison to my father. He would abuse me physically, mentally, verbally, and emotionally in every given moment. He left no stone unturned in this regard. He would beat me into unconsciousness. He accused me of being the cause of my mother's death, who died during my childbirth. Whenever Dad had any problem at home, he would accuse me of being the cause of it. One time he even beat me at school when my teacher called him to school because I had beat up my classmate who had beaten me up first. I tried to explain to him, but he wouldn't listen, and he just beat me even more. One day, it was fun day at school, and everyone was supposed to invite their parents to visit the school for party and introduction activities. I chose not to invite my dad, so I was alone at the festivities. I felt envious of all my classmates for having loving parents to have fun with. My teacher noticed me alone, came over and offered to be my parent for the day. I was so happy. We had great fun together. Miss Linda had lost both her husband and her son in a plane crash, only she had survived. After Fun Day had passed, Miss Linda showed more interest in me. She would bring me sandwiches and spend time with me during breaks. I thought of her as my mom. When I succeeded in my final exams, she hugged me with tears of joy. I unconsciously said, "Thanks, Mom." I went home happy that day, but had to face my dad again. He asked me why I was late coming home, and I told him about having to pass my final exams. He didn't believe me, though, and asked me to show him proof. Unfortunately, I had none, so he began kicking and punching me. There was a knock on the door. He tried to block me from opening the door, but I managed to open it. Miss Linda was standing there. She glanced at my bruises and bloody face and moved between me and my dad to protect me from further abuse. Dad snarled and threatened her with a beating if she didn't leave immediately. But she hit him in the eyes with a blast of mace or pepper spray, and he went down to the floor in extreme discomfort, grabbing at his eyes. Miss Linda called the police, told them about Dad's child abusive nature, and had him arrested. Now I live with Miss Linda as my new mom. Dad is in prison, where I hope he stays till he dies or rots. Either outcome is okay with me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lauren. Did you ever wonder what it would be like to have your life completely destroyed by someone close to you? Ever thought about what you would do then? I didn't have time to think, because that's exactly what happened to me. It all started 2 years ago. I lived a quiet life with my mom and dad and my sister. I loved my family. We were always together. We were happy until that fateful day. My dad got fired from his work, a big company. He had worked there for 20 years. The only money we had then was what he had managed to save over the years. Finding a new job wasn't easy. It was a hard time for all of us, especially my dad. He was becoming desperate. At times, he just sat there, quietly, deep in thought, and I rarely saw him smile since. One late night, we were still up waiting for him when he walked through the door. But something was different. He wasn't walking straight. It was the first time in my life seeing him drunk. I decided to take matters in my own hand. I started job hunting. I was lucky enough to find something suitable at a startup company. The pay was good enough, and the more I worked, the more I earned. I was trying my best to get our life back. I was giving it all I've got. My dad started asking me for money. I was more than happy to give him what he needed. I didn't even ask what it was for. Then he started asking for more. He came late almost every night, and he was never awake in the morning. It seemed like we hadn't talked together for ages. Then, money started disappearing from my purse. I got home from work one night. It had been a long day, and I was really tired. I put my bag in my room, and I went to the kitchen to find something to eat. I made myself a sandwich, then took it back to my room. But when I got to the door, I saw a shadow moving inside. I thought everyone was asleep, so I opened the door slightly and looked inside. I couldn't believe what I saw. My dad was standing over my bag, and my wallet was in his hand. He found no money in it, so he threw it on the bed and started going through my purse. At that moment, my mom came down the stairs. She had my dad's shirt in her hands and a small pack of white powder. I looked at her face. Her eyes were filled with tears. I tried to speak, but found nothing to say. My dad came out of my room. He saw us standing there. Suddenly, everything changed. He tore the shirt and the pack from my mom's hands. He was hysterical. He started breaking things around him. My mom and I were too scared to move, but then my sister came running down the stairs. He pulled her towards him and held a knife to her throat. He threatened to kill her if we didn't give him money. Without a moment's thought, I did what he asked. Things only got worse. Nothing was ever enough. He asked for more and more money, and if I refused, he'd get violent, beating up anyone in his path. I couldn't stand by and watch, so I would just give him what he wanted, until I decided enough was enough. He barged down the stairs one evening and asked for all the money I've got. I told him we had expenses to pay, the rent, school fees, but none of it mattered to him. He asked me again for the money and threatened me if I didn't do what he asked. I refused. He hit me so hard that I crashed my head against the wall and fell to the floor, bleeding. Everything went dark. My mom took me to different hospitals, and I had to do a lot of checkups and tests, but all the doctors said the same thing, that this was it. I was sentenced to live my life in darkness, never to see the light again. Bumping my head against the wall was one of the reasons, but apparently my psychological state played a huge role in my recovery. The doctors suggested that I'd be taken to a psychiatrist. My dad felt sorry for what he had done to me. He quit the drugs and alcohol, tried to be proper, but it was because of him that I was in this state. I didn't know if I could ever find it in myself to forgive him. I was torn inside. He was my dad, but I couldn't forget what had happened. I stopped talking shortly after, and he left, disappearing from our lives. No one knew where he was or what he was doing. A year had passed, and he came home. He sounded good, kind of like how he was before. He's trying to make up for what he had done. But to me, nothing he does makes a difference anymore. I'm still in the dark. That's something I'm gonna have to live with my whole life. I can't change that. What do you think I should do? Hi, I'm Gamila. Have you ever experienced a life problem? I know everyone has their own problems, but imagine you had to hide something all your life. Do you know what it feels like? If not, let me tell you. My name is Gamila. It means beautiful in Arabic, and I really am beautiful, or so I've been told. But I have a problem. I always wear a glove on my left hand anywhere I go, because I'm too embarrassed to show it to anyone. This has become my life problem. You see, I've had 7 fingers on my left hand since birth. My family couldn't afford a surgery to remove these extra 2 fingers. It would have cost a lot of money, and I would have had to travel abroad because we didn't have clever doctors or good hospitals in my area. So I've been wearing a glove on my left hand since I was young as a temporary solution for this problem. People always ask me about the glove, but I never answer. I just say that my fingers get cold. You would see me in the summer wearing a short, sleeveless blouse and a glove on my left hand. There were a lot of things I had to give up because of my hand. Once I wanted to play gymnastics. My mom was okay with it, so I went to many places to train, but they all refused to accept me because of my seven-fingered hand, which they considered to be a problem. At school, my classmates would laugh and ridicule me a lot, so I never had a lot of friends, just a few. I got into the college of my dreams. I thought that people might stop this bullying, so I considered taking off the glove. But I was afraid, because I was going to join a new society, so I didn't. I went with the glove instead. I was surprised at the amount of bullying at college, more than I had ever seen. It was a good thing that I decided to wear my glove. There were a lot of bullies there. Then, something happened. It became a turning point in my life. One time, while I was standing and speaking with my friends, one of them suddenly pulled off my glove. This glove was old and wasn't very tight on my hand. I had been intending to buy a new one after school, but they all discovered my secret. Some were astonished, while others started making fun of me and bullying me. I stopped going to university for a whole week. People blamed me for something that wasn't my fault, but that was the story of my life. If I hid away now, I'd be in this mess forever. So I decided never to wear that glove again. I decided to face my fears. I am beautiful enough to live a good life. I decided to ignore all the bullies and take care of myself. I went to my college. I didn't care about people's opinions. I focused on my studies, had great success, and proved to myself and to others that I was not disabled. The disabled can't think or succeed. Later, when I was attending a lecture by a famous doctor, he noticed my hand and offered to operate on it and make it look normal. This surgery would be the first of its kind in my country, and I accepted. When I saw my hand after the surgery, I couldn't believe myself. Bullying can ruin people's lives, but as they say, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
I usually host a slumber party once a month, so my girlfriends already know the drill. They bring their jammies, blankets, nail polish, hair products, lots of snacks, candies, and chocolates, but this time, Lucy brought wine. She had to sneak the wine in my house because my mom is kind of strict when it comes to drinking. My dad is almost never home. My mom sleeps really early, so we kinda had the house all to ourselves. We put on onesies, random dresses, and some costumes. My favorite is the Cinderella dress, and I still like wearing it even if I'm 17 now. We're all 17. I have three best friends, Lucy, Ashley, and Sheila. We have lots of fun and lots of secrets together. Sometimes I wish time would stop so we can always have each other. I know time will come that I will be separated from them. College will happen, and we'll have different lives in different circles. At least for now, we can be silly high school kids. We have an ideal high school life. We all have boyfriends, but mine is the most popular one. Well, I'm pretty popular at my school too. I also do well with academics. None of my friends are failing or anything. We're not the typical popular cheerleaders with no brains type. We do not have family drama. Our social life is great. We have the best high school life ever. While dancing and partying all night, Lucy came up with an idea. She said, "Let's play Truth or Dare." We got giddy because we know the night is going to get crazy. We sat down, forming a circle, then Lucy spun the bottle, and the bottle chose me. Truth or dare? Truth. Not in the mood for a dare yet, I said. Pick a question. They prepared some questions on a piece of paper and put them inside a fishbowl. If you could choose to be someone else for tonight, who would you choose and why? Lucy asked. I just laughed and said, "What a lame question. I don't want to be anybody else. I'm awesome. I have an awesome life." "Cheers to that," they said. The night passed and I woke up in the middle of the night because I felt like someone was watching me, but when I woke up, no one was around. I don't know how, but my feet just started moving. I walked like I was trying to follow something or someone. My gut feelings are trying to bring me somewhere. Then, in the middle of the darkness in our backyard, I swear I heard footsteps. I felt a sting on my left shoulder. Something poked my shoulder. I removed it. I guess it's a tranquilizer? And then I passed out. From here on, listen carefully because I guarantee you're going to love this story. It's like a movie, and I cannot believe that this thick plot is actually my life. I tried putting together the stories that happened while I was gone, and someone else was being me. I know it sounds complicated, but before I proceed, Do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications. So here it goes. Someone tranquilized me, and I instantly fell asleep. By the way, my name is Nancy. You have met my friends, and I'm sure you'd like to know who drugged me and what the motive is. Meet Patricia. At first, I had no idea why she looked exactly like I do. I thought I was dreaming. Before passing out, I asked her who she was. She told me that her name is Nancy. She was obviously messing with me. Then she told me that her name is Patricia, and that she's my twin, and she would love to be Nancy instead. What? I did not believe her, because I don't have a twin sister. My mom and dad would never keep any secrets from me. Or would they? She said that she was kept by our parents in a mental institution a couple of hours away from our town, ever since we were 3. I just realized that I have no recollection of any kind of memories when I was only 3 years old. At first, I thought, wow, is this really happening? I just think I watched too much TV. But this is reality. How did it happen? Let me tell you how it happened. Well, at first, she tranquilized me while I was asleep. I think she had other people with her who dragged me into a pickup, covered my mouth, tied me up, and blindfolded me. And then they brought me into a dark basement, I think. I'm not sure, because when I woke up, everything was just a blur. I only saw her face. I thought I was looking in the mirror. She told me everything that I needed to know. Well, her version of the story. I was shocked, but I would like to know my mom and dad's version of the story as well. Patricia told me that they got her locked up in a mental institution with special care. My mom did not like the idea, but eventually agreed when Patricia looked at her and said, "Daddy's next." I got the chills, but she never told me the reason why she ended up in the mental institution. She has been following me ever since we were 14 years old. One of the security staff has got a crush on her, so she's able to go in and out when no one is looking. She wants me dead because she would like to replace me and have my awesome life. She said she would take revenge on mom and dad for depriving her of having a life like I do. It got me worried, but she made me powerless. For the second time, she injected me again, so I passed out. Next thing I remember, I'm in a dark room with just a bed, a pillow, and a blanket. This must be her room. I'm locked inside the mental institution, just like in the movies. She managed to make my friends believe that she is me. She's clever. They went shopping, they partied, and they did not even realize that something was wrong. She must really be pulling it off. Even my parents and my boyfriend are not suspecting a thing. But our prom is almost here. Me and my friends are all excited for it. But I think I have to give up the dream of going since I'm locked up in here. I just miss my friends, I miss my parents, I miss my boyfriend, and I miss my life. It hurts me that I've been missing for a while, and they didn't even notice or feel that it's Patricia and not me. She's just a stranger to them. After 1 week, I made friends with the security staff. They kept on asking why I was so kind and polite to all of them. I tried to tell them the truth, but they just made me drink some medicine because they thought I was hallucinating. Then a surprise happened. My parents visited me. I mean, they visited Patricia? I don't know. When I saw them, I gave them a hug. "I miss you. I'm so glad you're okay. Are you guys hurt or anything?" My mom answered, "Honey, why would we be hurt?" I know my mom would believe me. My dad's judgment is not always the best. "Mom, this is me, Nancy. She switched us. She tied me up and she hurt me." And then my dad interrupted. "Enough, Patricia." "Dad, I am Nancy." I said enough. "You've pulled this trick before, and why on earth do you think this is going to work again?" I pleaded so hard, but my dad threatened that they would leave if I still insist. So I just cried. I love my dad, but he's never around, so no wonder we don't have a great relationship. I wonder if he even knows when my birthday is. I mean, our birthday. But then again, I don't want to judge him. I know he's just trying to be tough. But I looked at my mom. I can see in her eyes that she truly feels sorry for me, whether she thinks I'm Nancy or Patricia. Honey, I know things haven't been great, but a promise is a promise. A promise? Yes, we will not break our promise, which is when your doctor says you're ready to go, we will bring you back home. I cried and I had a meltdown. I just couldn't help it. Mom, I am Nancy. Please believe me, please. My dad ordered the staff to drag me out of their sight, but when they tried to grab me by my arms, I resisted, so my shirt got torn apart, baring my shoulders. My parents saw this, and they were shocked. My mom pointed on my left shoulder. Well, I had this weird birthmark on my left shoulder. Maybe they recognized it. My mom looked at my dad and said, "She is Nancy." My dad told the staff to leave us alone to talk. He gave me a hug and said, "I'm sorry. How did this happen? Why are you here? When did you meet your twin sister?" My mom said, "I told them how Patricia executed her plan, but I asked them how they knew it was me." They looked at each other. My dad gave my mom a slight nod as if saying it's time to let me know. "When you were 3, I left you and Patricia upstairs to play. When I got back, I saw you on the floor with a pencil stabbed on your left shoulder. We saw Patricia holding a hammer, and your head was also bleeding, which resulted in loss of your memories. We thought you were dead." My mom did not finish the story. She started crying while leaning on my dad's chest. My dad continued, "The doctors said that if we wasted just a couple of seconds more, you might not be with us." And he let out a sigh. I have an uncle with the same situation as Patricia. The genes must have passed on to her. I'm sure that there's something wrong with her. So even at a young age, we made a special program for her to be admitted here. We had high hopes that she will become normal. I absent-mindedly responded, "You recognized me because of the scar on my shoulder? I thought it was just a weird birthmark. What are you gonna do with Patricia now?" Mom and Dad went home and proceeded to my room right away. Patricia didn't know that my parents are aware of what happened. They gave her a hug. My parents apologized to her. "We are sorry. We love you, and this is the only way we know you would be better." She instantly knew that my parents knew, and she ran away. My mother called the police but instructed them to never hurt Patricia. Patricia is a very smart girl. She went to a party with Lucy, Sheila, and my boyfriend. She told them, "I have a twin sister and she's trying to kill me." They just all laughed at her. Then I arrived, but instead of making things better, it validated her statement. "Oh my goodness, there's 2 of you?" my boyfriend said. I said, "Guys, it's me, Nancy." "Do not believe her, I'm Nancy, she's my evil twin," Patricia said. "Come on, this is me, we all grew up together," I said. Then I looked at my boyfriend. "Babe, you seriously didn't know it wasn't me?" "Babe, don't listen to her," Patricia said. "Can someone prove who the real Nancy is, please?" Sheila said. I had no choice but to reveal the secrets we have just to prove that I am the real Nancy. My friends got convinced in no time. They all ran to my side and were afraid of Patricia. Instead of helping, my boyfriend Marco, he ran away. "Seriously, I think you should break up with him," Patricia told me. Then to our horror, she pulled out a gun and pointed at us. We all gasped. "I enjoyed having your life, and I'm trying to make it permanent. Oh, by the way, you got accepted to Harvard, but I think I'll be the one going there instead." She pulled the trigger, but surprisingly, Marco jumped in front of the bullet. Turns out he just left to call the police. He went back because he knows something bad is going to happen. Marco was shot, but we heard the police siren. Patricia fired another shot, but thankfully the police were able to stop her. Now let's fast forward to the prom day. 2 weeks ago, when Marco got shot in the shoulder and Patricia was put back in the mental institution with more security this time. Good thing is, Mom and Dad decided to visit her more often to help her recover. The doctor said she would be better if we always visited her. I enjoyed the prom. We danced all night, and I finally shared my first kiss with Marco. But the sad part is, we decided to break up. We are going to different colleges, and I know that our relationship should not weigh us down. We could have a lot of opportunities. We made a pact that if ever we finish college after 4 years and we're still single, then we'll be back together. Before taking off to college, I visited Patricia. I know she hates me, but I told her that I love her, and I forgive her. I also made a deal with her that every summer I will visit and make memories with her. I told her that I would like to get to know her, and here I am now. After 4 years, I graduated at Harvard University. I majored in psychology, and I'm doing research now with my colleagues about Patricia's case. As for Marco, well, he's already taken. While I was gone, he took care of Patricia, just like how I always requested during our phone calls. He got to know her and he fell for her, because despite her crazy mind, a good heart is lying within. Weird, I know, but that is how life goes. Besides, Patricia deserves a second chance, just like everyone else. Don't we all feel special sometimes? I grew up in an orphan house. I'm not trying to pretend that there was anything special about it, but I grew up with this nagging voice inside my head telling me how special I am and that my life will eventually turn upside down. It turned out I was not being delusional or anything. What happened to me was every foster child's dream. If only I knew what my future held for me. My mom, dad, and twin sister committed suicide in 1992. I was saved by my extended family only to get abandoned later. I was disowned not because two of the wealthiest families in the city couldn't raise me, but because I was a curse for their reputation. My mom and dad were not married, and that brought them so much shame until they took their own lives. Fast forward few months later, one day I woke up at a children's home. I'm an orphan now. I have absolutely no memories of my parents or even my twin sister, but I do remember my extended family very well. They gave me up when I was 6 years old. My uncle is an extremely rich businessman. He was never really bad to me. In fact, he put me in what you can call a fancy home. Although he promised to visit me every weekend, he never did. I was put in a medium-sized room with 4 other girls, Rosaline, Claire, Bella, and me, Rachel. They were all dressed in clean nightgowns, but they were all the same color, pale green. Mrs. Milton, our guardian, gave me a similar gown to put on. It felt as if I was admitted into kids' military. Our hair was always put up in a tight bun. We all looked the same. Mrs. Milton was not the kindest person you could come across, but she wasn't evil either. The house was divided into 2 sections, one for the boys and one for the girls. The only time we met the boys was in the outside building, which was some sort of a school. We took a few classes every day, and to be honest, we had some really good teachers. I always sat next to a boy called Nate. I thought he was super smart, and he always helped with my math homework because numbers were never really my field of expertise. We eventually became really good friends. Whenever I went back to the room, all the girls were too occupied with their toys, and they were all good friends already. It felt like I was an outsider. However, a few months later, I became the alpha of the group. Don't get me wrong, this is not another Oliver Twist story. We used to pull pranks on each other all the time, and we had a really good laugh. I mean, being in a foster home is not exactly a vacation, so we made the best out of a bad situation. When the girls would go to sleep at night, I would go fake sleeping until Mrs. Milton had gone to sleep as well. Then I would stare out that tiny, teeny window and start counting the stars one by one. I named one after my dad, one after my mom, one after my twin sister, and finally, one after Nate. I would stay up all night long daydreaming until I fell asleep.
Mrs. Milton would wake us up around 6 a.m. to have breakfast and go to class. It went on like that for years and years. Every day seemed exactly like the other, except on the weekends, which wasn't really much of a weekend. It only meant we were allowed to eat dessert. I have always been an extremely curious little girl, and the reason Nate and I grew so close was because he was a curious boy as well. We had no idea about the outside world. We had so many unanswered questions, and sometimes we would make up answers to tame our brains. The girls had relatives visiting them during the weekend, but I would stay in my room. Sometimes I cried, and sometimes I shut my eyes close and tried to imagine what my mom looked like. One day during science class, Nate asked me who visits me on the weekend. I never said anything back. I pretended that I didn't even hear him. But in a moment of extreme confusion and sadness, I wrote something down on a piece of paper and passed it to him. It said, "Let's get out of here." We were 12 years old at the time. I didn't care about the consequences at all. All I cared about was getting outside of here and exploring what was happening in the outside world. I wanted to go back to my uncle, even if he didn't want me. Nate looked at the paper, folded it into half, and he freaking swallowed the paper, and he just nodded his head at me. I wasn't sure what he meant by the nod until at midnight. While I was looking at the stars I befriended for years now, I heard the slip of a paper under the door. I quickly got up and the paper said, "Meet me at the school building in 5 minutes." I slowly opened the door and ran downstairs. Nate and I stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do. We started discussing a runaway plan. But seriously though, what could two kids do to escape a fully guarded huge building? We were smarter than any of you would think. For the next week, we studied every movement happening around the place. When security guards changed their shifts, which teachers left class early, we even memorized the times when Mrs. Milton had to use the bathroom. We had a solid plan. At the end of the week, on Friday, we had history class, and the teacher always left a few minutes early. At the same exact time, security guards changed their shifts, and Mrs. Milton took about 3 to 4 minutes to come downstairs and walk us back to our rooms. That was it. That was the moment I have been looking for all along. We passed by the guard's back and we ran and ran like there was no tomorrow. After a few blocks, we were out of breath. We were two kids dressed exactly alike with no money and no place to go. But we couldn't stop, not after we finally did it. We kept on walking and walking until it was night. I looked up at the sky and I could not believe my eyes. The sky had endless stars. I let my hair down and got rid of that stupid bun I've had for years. I decided that Nate and I could go into a shop and ask for a suitable job that could offer us a place to live and food. Yes, I was that smart, and I still am. So we went into a grocery store owned by an old lady. We told her our story, and what she said back was, "I need to call the police." And so we begged and cried and cried and begged, and the lady had a big heart. She offered us some sandwiches and said we could help deliver groceries around the block. We immediately agreed. Nate and I had to sleep on a blanket inside the store every night. It was not a great situation, but we loved that sense of freedom. We felt like we were hero kids with superpowers. We stayed with the old lady for what seemed like a year. If you haven't guessed it by now, I was in love with Nate. I had our wedding planned inside my head, and although he never said anything back, I knew he loved me even more. One day we heard that old lady talking to an officer who was looking for two lost kids. We grabbed all the cash we could and ran through the back door. I know it's inconsiderate to rob the woman who provided for us, but there was no other way. We quickly stopped the cab and asked the driver to drive as far as possible. He gave us a weird look, but when we showed him the money, he started driving. At this point, Nate held my hand for the first time ever, and he said, "We'll be okay." I felt my heart melt to the ground, but traffic noise brought me back to my senses. The cab driver was driving funny, but none of us was really familiar with driving, so we never really paid much attention. I looked at Nate and he said, "We need to find my uncle. He's rich. He can help. You can hide in my room."